You're listening to SnowbizNow with Nicholas Snow. Small screen, big queen, worldwide audience. It's not radio, it's Gadio.
Hi, this is Nicholas Snow, and I'm about to introduce you to the first person in the world known to have been cured of HIV/AIDS. He's most commonly known as the Berlin patient. Before I bring you this extensive episode, because it is so extensive, I want to remind you, you may subscribe to my podcast at iTunes. Just search SnowbizNow. Also, from this episode page at blogtalkradio.com/SnowbizNow, there is the opportunity for you to share this episode on Facebook. You may also tweet it, and you may also download it. So please, if you don't have time to listen to the entire episode now, I invite you to make a note of it and listen to it later. And I also encourage you to make this episode widely known to your friends, fans, and followers around the world via your own social networks. On July 24th, 2012, the Timothy Ray Brown Foundation of the World AIDS Institute was launched at the 19th International AIDS Conference in Washington, D.C. Timothy made the decision that he wanted to do more than just share his story. He wanted to be a leader and spokesperson in the global effort to find a cure for HIV. This is what moved him to create the Timothy Ray Brown Foundation. Timothy often mentions how he feels so humbled and honored that people around the world write to him every day telling him that his story provides a real and tangible hope for the development of a cure that will benefit countless others. In November of 2012, Timothy Ray Brown participated in a series of meetings and speeches in Southern California to share his story and to promote his foundation, which is dedicated to making sure that Brown does not remain the only member of the exclusive club of those cured of HIV/AIDS. This episode of SnowbizNow includes a formal speech made by Timothy at the monthly Positive Life series in Palm Springs, a one-on-one interview I had with Timothy, highlights of a lunch conversation which took place at the Desert AIDS Project, my own testimonial as a person living with HIV, and I bring you an extensive lecture by a researcher from the City of Hope Hospital, which was also part of a November presentation at the Positive Life series in Palm Springs, California. So, for an inspirational, mind-blowing, and scientifically almost impossible episode, stay tuned. My online radio program has averaged well over 100,000 listeners every month since going on the air in the summer of 2012. Sometimes I've reached over 300,000 listeners in a single month. At the very top of my show, I have a slot for a presenting sponsor. If your business was the presenting sponsor, I would be broadcasting a 30-second commercial on your behalf right now. If you want to secure this slot for your commercial, for more information, simply go to SnowbizNow.com and click on the Team SnowbizNow link in the main sub-menu. I'm gay, but my audience consists of people from all over the world and from all walks of life. Don't you want to reach them on behalf of your business? Go to SnowbizNow.com and click on the Team SnowbizNow link in the main sub-menu.
You thought it was simply raining men. Well, now it's actually snowing men. And women. And transgender folks as well. Although this storm originated in Hollywood, it has simply become too powerful for Tinseltown to contain. In fact, it's now a snowstorm of global proportions, engulfing people of all genders and sexual orientations, from all walks of life, in every country and throughout cyberspace. In the forecast, we have adventures in the world of travel and entertainment, news of current events, sexuality and politics, lifestyle, fitness and spirituality, personal empowerment, pop culture, and more. So grab your snowshoes or take shelter. If you want help with the drifting snow, grab a shovel and get ready to call, chat, or tweet, because a blizzard is inevitable. At the center of the snowstorm is one of the world's primo promo homos on the go-go, Mr. Nicholas Snow himself. His slogan? Small screen, big queen, worldwide audience. You've heard it before. Now you'll hear it again. Over 6 feet of snow has hit the internet. Yes, as you anticipated, perhaps with great excitement, or with fear and trepidation, or maybe even with unadulterated joy. It's time for SnowbizNow.
This episode of SnowbizNow is executive produced by... Actually, I'm the only executive producer at this time. However, if you make a one-time contribution in a certain amount for every episode that's produced in the following month, I will name your name right here during the executive producer acknowledgments. For more information, simply go to SnowbizNow.com and click on the Team SnowbizNow link in the main sub-menu. The Positive Life series takes place monthly throughout most of the year in Palm Springs, California. And on November 13th, 2012, there was a special town hall forum featuring the Berlin patient Timothy Brown. And as I have said, he is the only person to have been cured of HIV to date. At that event, Timothy gave a formal speech, and he was followed by 3 leading HIV cure researchers talking about their work. Up next, I bring you Timothy's formal presentation, and later on in the program, I bring you one of the presentations by one of the HIV cure researchers for those who want a medically intensive portion of the show. So here is Timothy Brown addressing the town hall.
Without further ado, Mr. Timothy Brown.
Thank you. My mother named me Timothy Ray Brown. The media named me the Berlin patient. I'm the man who once had HIV. I don't make this statement as an empty boast. To be honest, I don't think I fully believed it until the New England Journal of Medicine published a case report about me in February of 2009, almost 2 years after I got cured. There's nothing like having a respected medical journal talking about you to drive home a point. Since being cured, I have mostly gone on quietly with my life. Some of you might think I would have shouted it from the rooftops. I've always been a pretty private person, so I was initially satisfied with just being cured. It wasn't until I looked at the bigger picture that I realized that I needed to do more than just tell my story. And that's why on July 24th, at the 19th International AIDS Conference in Washington, D.C., I launched the Timothy Ray Brown Foundation of the World AIDS Institute to push for an HIV cure. Now back to my story. By sharing it, I hope I can bring some new optimism to the fight against HIV and the global quest to find a cure. So how does a man from Seattle, Washington, come to be identified with a medical milestone in a city half a world away from his birthplace? I was attending school in Berlin in 1995 when I tested positive for HIV. My reaction was like that of many others who were diagnosed at the time. I was terrified. I knew people who were struggling with the disease. Some of my friends had already died from it. I don't think I've ever felt so alone as I did at that moment. It didn't help matters that a friend told me that I probably only had a couple of years to live. At that time, most of us viewed an HIV diagnosis as a death sentence. Cure was not a topic of discussion. I just wanted to survive. If you are familiar with the history of HIV, you know that the following year brought a new treatment that started to hold the disease in check for many of us. Combination antiretroviral therapy seemed like a miracle in 1996. Really sick people got better, people looked healthier. Over time, we realized that many of us were living longer. I knew that I still had a deadly disease, but death didn't hover quite so near. I came to believe that I would remain healthy and live a pretty normal life. The next 11 years were pretty uneventful. Germany's universal healthcare system provided me treatment that most people in the world did not have. I was lucky that I mostly tolerated my HIV medications. I got used to the idea of a lifetime of pills. The clinics in Berlin allowed me to move HIV to a back burner. My story became commonplace for an HIV patient with access to healthcare. That is until 2006, when progressive fatigue resulted in a referral to an oncologist. A bone marrow biopsy showed that I had acute myeloid leukemia. You didn't have to be a specialist to know that this was bad news. Before I could spend much time wrestling with my mortality, I was admitted to the University Hospital under the care of oncologist Dr. Gero Hutter, who started me on standard care chemotherapy. Chemotherapy wanted to remind me that treatment for a deadly disease can be miserable. It mocked me. What? Protease inhibitors upset your timing once? Well, get a load of this. I developed pneumonia early on. I had to stop my third round of chemotherapy halfway through when I developed a sepsis infection. I could have died. Fortunately, I had some great doctors. I was released from the hospital. My leukemia appeared to be in remission, but there was concern because I hadn't been able to complete all of the chemotherapy. Dr. Hutter recommended a little vacation after my treatment, so I took off to Italy. The museums and beaches of Genoa were just what the doctor ordered. In addition to providing excellent advice, Dr. Hutter had a revolutionary treatment idea. He was aware of the discussions going on in HIV research about something called a CCR5 receptor mutation. The CCR5 receptor allows the HIV virus to attach to the T cell and subsequently infect the cell, spreading the disease. People without CCR5 appeared resistant to HIV infections, but they are rare. Only 1% of the Northern European population is that lucky. So why am I telling you this? Well, another treatment for leukemia would be to wipe out the cancerous immune system and replace it with healthy stem cells from a donor. Dr. Hutter thought that if a stem cell transplant was necessary, why not use a compatible donor who had the CCR5 mutation? The idea was that if my cancerous HIV susceptible immune system was replaced with an HIV resistant line of stem cells, not only would my leukemia be treated, but HIV might be cleared from my body. I thought, a possibility to be rid of cancer and HIV at the same time? Who could say no to the chance to strike back a disease that had killed some of my closest friends? Who could say no to being part of something so groundbreaking? Who could say no? Me, that's who. I said no. Now let me put this in perspective. When this was first proposed to me by one of Dr. Hutter's colleagues, I was still recovering from my chemotherapy. I had come close to dying. By comparison, my 11 years of HIV treatment had been a cakewalk. And stem cell transplants are very risky procedures. Did I really have to go through this extra hell? Some might call me a difficult patient. That's not true. I usually follow my doctor's advice. Remember, I did go to Italy. In January of 2007, my leukemia returned. Initial attempts at a different chemotherapy were not successful. A stem cell transplant became a viable option. Dr. Hutter screened 67 specimens before he found a compatible donor who also had the CCR5 mutation. I underwent total body irradiation to wipe out my body's immune system before receiving the transplant. I last took my HIV medication on the day of my stem cell transplant. I haven't taken any since. The result, there was no detectable HIV in my system. My T cell counts increased, I thrived. I went to the gym. With HIV, I had developed wasting syndrome. Without HIV, I developed muscles. I was looking good. I felt good. Until 2008, when my leukemia returned. But not my HIV. 7 months after my stem cell transplant and being 100% off of HIV medications, I was without detectable disease. Well, the HIV anyway. In February 2008, I underwent a second stem cell transplant from the same donor. My recovery from the second transplant was complicated. I became delirious and I had to have a brain biopsy. I have been left with some neurological problems that require ongoing care. My life is far from perfect, but it's still my life. It is now more than 5 years after my stem cell transplant. I am still without leukemia, but that's not why you are listening to me today. It is that after 5 years without HIV medications, I still have no trace of HIV in my body. I have been poked and biopsied from head to toe. Samples have been taken from my spinal fluid, anal mucosa, and any other places doctors can think to stick a needle. But no virus anywhere. To quote Dr. Hooter in the December 2nd, 2010 issue of the medical journal Blood, and he's talking about me, it is reasonable to conclude that a cure of HIV has been achieved in this patient. After 30 years of dealing with a disease that has killed more than 34 million women, children, and men, somebody in the medical community said it, hell, published it. Cure, not it would be great one day sort of way, he meant today. I have selected blue rose as a symbol of hope for the Timothy Ray Brown Foundation of the World AIDS Institute. The blue rose does not occur in nature, and in alchemy it represents the impossible made possible. The cure for HIV is my blue rose. When I received my HIV diagnosis in 1995, I fell to my knees. And in 2007, when I was diagnosed as being cured, I fell to my knees again. But this time I prayed that one day the millions of people living with HIV and AIDS worldwide would receive their own blue rose. I will continue to dedicate my life, my blood, my body, my mind, and my soul toward this expedition to find an elusive blue rose. I will not lay you down. Thank you.
Don't go away, because there's much more yet to come. Up next, my one-on-one interview with Timothy Brown. This episode of SnowbizNow was produced by... Actually, I'm the only producer at this time. However, if you make a one-time contribution in a certain amount, for every single episode that's produced in the following month, I will name your name right here as part of the producer acknowledgments at this point during the show. For more information, simply go to SnowbizNow.com and click on the Team SnowbizNow link in the main submenu.
How many times have you been on vacation with naked men swimming and sunbathing and very much enjoying one another's company? This is a common experience in Palm Springs, California, where one of the most popular gay men's clothing optional resorts is the Warm Sands Villas, conveniently located near the airport, restaurants, and nightlife. Guests may choose from a variety of room types and enjoy 24-hour access to the pool, hot tub, and roof deck, with an unobstructed view of stunning mountains and the surrounding area. For more information, check out warmsandsvillas.com. To view a 20-minute documentary about the Warm Sands Villas, check out the videos at SnowbizNow.com.
And now it's time to check in with Tony Marchese at Trio Restaurant, where Palm Springs eats.
We have guests that come here every week and just sit at the bar because they meet new people all the time. Every week someone tells us they met someone new at Trio and then they come back with them the next week after. So that's the kind of place you want to be. When you feel at home, you're happy. Mark and I are from the Midwest, so when we opened Trio, we wanted to bring that Midwest feeling here to California. Our pot roast is our #1 seller. Our soul is unbelievable. So we're affordable. We have a great staff. You're always welcome.
For a video all about Trio, go to SnowbizNow.com and click on the video tab in the sub-menu, or check out TrioPalmSprings.com.
New designer furnishings, sparkling cocktail rings, vintage jeans and shirts for moms, teens, boys, and flirts. Area rugs and stylish bedding design your wedding. Shiny knickknacks and glam Hollywood throwbacks. You'll find it here at Revivals. Voted best of the Valley thrift stores. Now with even more new treasures, plus one-of-a-kind consignment and estate items. Fashion, accessories, furniture, it's all in store at Revivals. Find it here. Visit us at revivalstores.com to find a Revivals store near you.
You're listening to Snowbiz Now with Nicholas Snow. Small screen, big queen, worldwide audience. It's not radio, it's Gadio.
The Positive Life series featured in this program took place on November 13th. On November 2nd, the Desert AIDS Project hosted a lunch with some specific invited guests, including, of course, Timothy Brown. Because I knew that I was going to be able to record his presentation at the Positive Life series, and because I had the opportunity to have lunch in an informal setting with him and many others, I focused my one-on-one interview on the sorts of questions that would not generally pop up. I have the privilege of speaking with you, Timothy, today on November 2nd, 2012. Welcome to Palm Springs. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 46 now.
Okay. And when did you know definitively that you no longer had HIV in your body?
It wasn't really until Gary Hooter's paper got published in the New England Journal of Medicine that I believed that I was cured of HIV.
And do you know when that was? What date? What year?
It was 2009, I believe.
And
I don't remember exactly the month.
Okay. That became a huge worldwide story.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Was that surreal for you?
Yeah, it was pretty surreal. At that point, I was still recovering from everything I had gone through after the second transplant. The first one went really well. I didn't have much graft versus host disease during that, and graft versus host disease is basically when your body rejects the new blood, the new stem cells. I didn't have that bad the first time, and that's probably why the leukemia came back. The HIV went away after about 3 months after getting the first transplant, and then luckily after the second transplant, the HIV stayed away. It didn't come back at all, and the leukemia went away as well.
Clearly, because of the global relevance of this part of your life story, it probably will be what you are most famous for. But you were a fully evolved human being who had led a very full life before this put you on the map in a different way.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, what in your life before this happened to you did you feel were your greatest accomplishments, and what defined you before this, and what do you choose to define yourself?
Before this all came about, I basically was concerned about getting my education because I'd gone to university in the United States before I moved to Europe, but I didn't finish, and I started university in Berlin. I had been living in Barcelona, but since classes were taught in Spanish and Catalan, I didn't really care about learning Catalan because Catalan is spoken by about 3 or 4 million people in the world, and it seemed kind of senseless to me to learn that language. So I moved to Berlin and worked on my German, and got so I could get into university, and I had to take a combination of courses to get into university. I had to do things like math in German, and more German, like scientific German, and like something like social studies and history in German, and so I was able to develop my German, and I eventually was able to translate from German to English, and so I started doing that for a living, and I was pretty good at it. I was working for a company that they didn't really care if you had a degree in translation, so I was lucky there, and but it wasn't until becoming cured of HIV that I began to focus my life on working for a cure for everyone else, because I didn't want to be the only person in the world cured of HIV.
And how are you supporting yourself?
I'm receiving Social Security, so I'm living off of about $900 a month, and plus money I get from speaking, and from other things revolving around a cure for HIV.
Okay.
I've started a new foundation, the Timothy Ray Brown Foundation, and it's the first foundation in the history of HIV that has focused on finding a cure for HIV. In the meantime, I've heard that AMFAR is actually devoting a good portion of their income to looking for a cure for HIV. So I'm working with them, and we're fighting together to find a cure for HIV.
When you
and AIDS.
When you became known worldwide as the Berlin patient, you had chosen to remain private for about 2 years?
Yeah.
During that time, did you have paparazzi or tabloids who were trying to out you?
No, I didn't. I did do an interview with a newspaper, which is the German equivalent of the New York Times. It's called Die Zeit, and they did an interview with me and the professor of the department that the oncology department, and I asked them not to take pictures of me, nor to use my name. So I became Neil. So yeah, to them I was Neil. To the rest of the world, I was the Berlin patient.
So you had a pseudonym. And Did any of your friends or family know that you were the Berlin patient?
Yes, they did. Yeah, I was very open to friends and family about it.
But they kept your secret?
Yeah, they did.
And when did you decide to go public, and how did that happen?
I decided to do an interview for a magazine called, a German magazine called, suddenly I forgot the name.
Okay.
I did the interview, and there was a very good article drawn out of that, and they took pictures of me all over Berlin. And so when that came out, actually the other media organizations get a preview of the story before the rest of the world does. So I came home from somewhere one day, and it was during the winter, and in December of 2010, and there were reporters outside my house, and they rang the doorbell of my apartment, and my ex-boyfriend's new partner had tried to scare them away, and they said, "Be careful if you go outside, go out the back." And I looked out the front door and didn't see anyone. And then I walked across the street. I was going to catch a bus to go to a friend's house, and this woman came up to me and said, "Hi, are you Timothy Brown?" And I said, "No." And she said, "You sure look like him." And I'm like, "How do you know how he looks?" And she said, "Well, I've seen pictures of him." And then I finally said, "Okay, I am him. I'm Timothy Brown." And so she asked if she could have her photographer take pictures of me, and I said, "No, I can't do that." Because I was asked by the magazine's called Der Stern, which is the Star in German. I was asked by them not to have anything to do with media
until the story.
Until actually there was like a year that I had to wait, and so I had to honor that. And so I had a friend of mine who was acting as my publicity manager. She had arranged the interview with Der Stern, and I called her. I took the bus and then got on the subway up to where I was going, to my friend's house, and I got off the subway and was talking to her, and then I was walking across a bridge. There was snow on the ground, and the bridge was very icy, and I slipped and fell on my head, and got taken to a hospital. I fell on my back and then my head, and falling on my back, I couldn't breathe. It knocked the wind out of me, and so I got taken to hospital. And my friend Gushen, who I was on the phone with, she's like, I said something, and then she didn't hear me anymore, and then she heard people going, "Oh no, what's happened?" And then I got my phone back, and I called her back and said I had fallen and I'm in an ambulance. And so
that was a day you'll never forget.
Yeah, don't walk on ice if you're on this phone.
Yes, that's the moral of that story.
Right.
So I guess that probably the largest audience that you have spoken to was at the World AIDS Conference in Washington, D.C. this past summer.
Right.
Tell me how that whole experience was. Of being at the AIDS conference, being the Berlin patient, coming out on the world's most prominent HIV/AIDS platform.
When I decided to start my foundation, I was working with the World AIDS Institute. I still am. They are an organization that is, up till then, had been involved in writing about documenting the history of HIV. And so now it's become like the history of HIV to a cure. And we had our meetings in a different hotel that was separate from the actual conference. It was the Westin Hotel in DC, and we invited lots of press people, and there were, I think, 50 press organizations there, which was kind of surprising because a lot of them were covering the main conference. And so they came over to the Westin Hotel and covered my announcement. And the room was full, like, with a couple hundred people, and it was very well received, my speech, and the fact that I had started the foundation was very well received, and then I was interviewed by about 6 different news organizations right afterwards. Before I made the announcement, I went over to the main conference and spoke with Sanjay Gupta of CNN, and that was well received. I had spoken with him on World AIDS, or before World AIDS Day, 2011. Among the other people that he also interviewed for that day was Obama, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Bono, and Alicia Keys.
And you.
And me, right.
How does that feel?
It felt good.
3 former presidents, one of the world's most famous musicians,
right.
and Alicia Keys, who's up there too. So.
Right, exactly, yeah. Felt very good. And I've also, I did a fundraiser meeting with AMFAR, and I was given a suit by Kenneth Cole. And Kenneth Cole also introduced me to Sarah Jessica Parker.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So, had you been a Sex and the City fan?
Kind of, sort of, yeah. I saw both movies, and I watched it occasionally. And I was living in Germany, so it was dubbed into German. So
okay.
Yeah. I knew what Sarah Jessica Parker sounded like in her real voice, but I mostly watched it in German.
Which was dubbed by someone else's voice.
Yeah.
Well, clearly you didn't get into this for the fame and the fortune, but who of the people that you met has left you most overwhelmed or starstruck?
Annie Lennox, who I met. Amphar also had a dinner and a concert, and for the dinner, it was for Bill Gates. And for the dinner, Sharon Stone spoke, and she actually started crying, and it seemed real, although she's a good actor, so I don't know.
It was real.
Yeah. And then afterwards, Annie Lennox played a concert with I can't think of who were backup.
The Eurythmics.
No, it wasn't the Eurythmics.
Oh, it was someone else.
Yeah, it was just Annie Lennox, and she had done the song with him before. I can't remember.
Okay, I don't know either.
And then I met her after the concert. And I went up to her and said, "I'm Timothy Brown," and she said, "I know you. I've read everything about you." So that was pretty incredible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Final question for now. Do you have a spiritual philosophy, and if so, what is it?
I was raised Christian, and my mother's become pretty kind of right-wing Christian now. She votes for Romney. Well, she votes Republican pretty much along the line. I was in a picture with Nancy Pelosi, and she's like, "Why are you with her in a picture?" And I'm like, "I need to work with her." And she's like, I don't know. Okay, back to, I have started attending a spiritualist church. They basically, believe that there are spiritual leaders in lots of different categories of religion. They do talk about Jesus and the importance of him.
You find that that's comforting for you?
Yeah.
You'll want to stay tuned for what's coming up next, because Timothy Brown shares his story at that informal lunch that I was discussing. The information unfolds in a much more natural, less stressful way, because what you've heard up until this point was from him speaking in front of a large group. However, of course, the one-on-one interview was a bit different. At any rate, stay tuned, because I have highlights from that very interesting lunch coming up next. This episode would not be possible without the support of the following associate producers. Actually, there are no associate producers of this episode, but if you want me to name your name about this point during the program in future episodes, become an associate producer by making a one-time or a monthly contribution in a nominal amount. For more information, simply go to SnowbizNow.com and click on the Team SnowbizNow link in the main sub-menu.
Are you captivated and wondering just what is next? Well, you should be. The score you're listening to is by award-winning producer, arranger, composer, and musician, Bruno Brugnano. Bruno has recorded and performed with leading musicians worldwide and has produced over 100 albums. Leading and respected directors and producers from throughout the world have entrusted Bruno to compose riveting and compelling scores for their film and television projects. For more information, visit www.bruno.com. brugnanobruno.webs.com. That's www.brugnanobruno.webs.com. Don't even consider making a movie without Bruno Brugnano. Seeking an adventure of a lifetime? Thailand awaits you with world-class resorts and spas, breathtaking beaches, beautiful Buddhist temples, and Bangkok, complete with SkyTrains, subways, and ultra-modern shopping malls. Leave home as a man and return as a woman if that's who you truly are. After all, many of Thailand's private hospitals are world leaders in sexual reassignment surgery. Start your adventure at facebook.com/visit Thailand. One of the world's finest Italian restaurants is actually in a suburb of Bangkok, Thailand. Oregano Pizza and Pasta. A bit of a trek by taxi from the central business district, but oh, so worth it. Preparing secret recipes passed down for generations, chefs have decades of experience using only the finest imported ingredients. Oregano, spelled with an I. Google Oregano Pizza and Pasta Bangkok. You'll be glad you did. Can't get enough of Hollywood? Are you bursting with news and gossip of your own? You are cordially invited to join our free social network at notesfromhollywood.com, home of the paparazzi prison. Sign up for free now. Publicize your events. Share your blogs, photos, and dreams. We report and celebrate worldwide adventures in travel and entertainment. Isn't it time to honor your inner movie star? Do so now at notesfromhollywood.com. You're listening to SnowbizNow with Nicholas Snow. Small screen, big queen, worldwide audience. It's not radio, it's Gadio.
Timothy Brown, as you can imagine, is like a rock star among leading doctors, researchers, and scientists around the world. Not to mention a role model for those of us living with HIV, hoping for a cure. At any rate, one of the individuals that was invited to the special lunch at the Desert AIDS Project on November 2nd is the DAP's new medical director, Dr. Homoyoon Konlu. Now, if I'm mispronouncing his first name, I apologize. At any rate, Dr. Konlu joined the Desert AIDS Project as its new medical director, and he's responsible for providing primary and HIV specialty client care through the organization's various clinics. Dr. Konlu comes to DAP from the AIDS Healthcare Foundation in Los Angeles, where he had been employed since 1999, most recently as medical director and principal investigator. Konlu is also a clinical instructor of medicine at UCLA's David Geffen School of Medicine. Receiving his undergraduate and graduate education at the University of Paris School of Medicine, Konlu did his residency in internal medicine at the Albert Einstein Medical Center in Philadelphia. He became licensed in California in 1998 and was appointed diplomat of the American Board of Internal Medicine the following year. Now, Dr. Konlu doesn't have a prominent role in this lunch, but one of the fascinating things, I think, in the upcoming conversation is I asked Dr. Konlu to describe how it was to be meeting Timothy Brown, the Berlin patient, in person.
In Berlin, I was diagnosed with HIV in 1995.
And that you're not from Berlin.
I'm not from Berlin. I'm from Seattle, Washington. I was there working as a translator, or well, no, actually, I went there to study and from Barcelona, and then I found out I had HIV in 1995, and at that time there was only AZT, so my doctor said, your CD4 cells are really low, so you need to start on medication. And I was like, I don't want to take AZT because I heard that what it had done to people. And so she said she put me on it at a very low dosage. And luckily, the next year in 1996. New medication came out, and I was able to take that, and then I did very well on the medication for the next 10 years. I had to break medication. I took a break for like 2 years. My doctor said you could probably go off medication for 6 months. And that was back in the days when they actually were telling patients to take breaks. I guess they don't do that anymore. Anyway, my system remained pretty okay for the next 2 years, but then my viral loads went up and my CD4 count went down, and so the doctor put me on medication again. And then in 2006, I took a trip to New York to a wedding. And I was very tired, and the whole time I thought it was just jet lag. Plus, the guy I was staying with would be on his computer like all night long, and I'd hear clicking, and it was right next to my bed. And, so I got back to Berlin and went to my partner's doctor, and then he eventually sent me to an oncologist because my red blood cell count was very low. He tried to treat me with
drugs.
No, blood transfusion. Yeah, and the values would go up and then drop really quickly. And so I went to an oncologist who eventually told me that he gave me a bone marrow biopsy and told me that was on a Friday, and I went back there on Monday expecting good news, but he gave me very bad news. I had acute myeloid leukemia, and that was a big shock. I didn't cry because I almost never cry. My partner cried profusely. Anyway, he sent me to a hospital, and he called that hospital, and he got Dr. Gerhuter on the telephone, I started on chemo treatment the next day. So I had found out on Monday that I had acute myeloid leukemia, and the next day I was getting chemo treatment. Which required putting tubes into my neck and running it down to my heart. And so I started that and was on that for a week. I thought I'd have like a week of therapy and that would be it, but it wasn't. Eventually, after the second round of chemo treatment, Dr. Uter came to me and said, I wanted to have your blood tested to look for possible donors. And he did that, and it came back with 260 possible donors for me. It's HLA types that they test for. And so that gave him the idea to look for a donor who was very resistant to HIV. A person with a CCR5 defect, meaning that the HIV cannot dock onto the CD4 cells. And so he started looking and found one after the 67th try. Wow. And at that point,
once predicted to be the impossible part of this scenario was that they would never find a donor. Mm-hmm. They found one like in the first day.
Yeah.
So, miracle number 5.
At that point, I was still saying no because I had gone through 2.5 rounds of chemo, and my leukemia was in remission, so I didn't think that I had to get any further treatment, and so I said no to the transplant, the stem cell transplant, because I knew it was very risky, and I didn't want to take that risk if I didn't have to. So I thought the leukemia was gone. It was just in remission, so it eventually came back, and that was the end of 2006, and so I eventually said, okay, I'll do it. And so I got my transplant in February of 2007, and 3 months later, I learned this later. 3 months later, my leukemia had been, the leukemia was in remission again, but HIV was gone. And I quit taking my HIV medications on the day of my transplant. I had a conversation with Gary Hooter recently, and he said that if I hadn't have proposed taking me off the medication, he thinks that it'd probably be better to wait a little while and to do that, because there is a risk involved there. But I went off the medication and have never taken any HIV medication since.
Excuse me, did they believe at the time that the HIV might be cured in the process, or was that a surprising outcome?
Dr. Hooter was looking for that, because that's why he looked for a person with a CCR5 defect.
Mm-hmm. So they were looking for that.
That was his goal. Yeah, that was his goal.
Yeah.
And he was thinking outside the box because he's an oncologist, had actually nothing to do with HIV before.
Dr. Conlon, what is it like for you to be sitting in this room with the Berlin patient as someone that's spent...
I almost ate him with my eyes. The first few minutes, because I did it. I mean, it's amazing because we read about him. We so fascinating story. When he came out first in New England Journal, first was in the Pro, and then was in New England, was published your case 2 to 3 years ago. And sitting with him and seeing that he's actually just a normal, like, us. It's amazing, it's humbling.
I saw you two meet in the room, and then I saw someone tell you who you had just met, and I could see the expression on your face.
Yes, it was. I didn't even know when you sent the email. I knew that the Berlin patient was an American. And I probably had come across your name, but it doesn't really register, so I didn't even know who we were meeting today, actually, because when we were coming, I asked him, what is the meeting about? Because I forgot. He said, and Bill said it's about Mr., such and such, and we didn't know. I said, who's he?
We're trying to respect his real identity. Timothy Brown.
Timothy Brown.
When Ray, introduced me, and it was amazing.
If you've listened to the program this far, you are clearly very interested in the subject matter. Still to come, I have a 15-minute lecture or so by one of the HIV cure researchers from the City of Hope who participated in the Positive Life meeting in Palm Springs in November. That's still ahead. I am so excited because now, just by being a listener of SnowbizNow, you get to save money at some of the best establishments around the world. For coupons and special offers exclusively for SnowbizNow listeners, go to SnowbizNow.com and click on the Coupons Special Offers tab in the main menu. You'll be glad you did. If you would like to make a special offer to SnowbizNow listeners, get in touch with me. To do that, go to SnowbizNow.com and click on the contact link in the submenu. I am so excited! Did I sound like Oprah? I'm Nicholas Snow, and the cold hard fact is that decades into the AIDS epidemic, completely armed with the knowledge to protect myself, I had a momentary lapse in my safer sex practices, and after decades of testing HIV negative, I became HIV positive. I knew because of my slip that there was a chance that this had happened, and I sought out a voluntary HIV test at an anonymous testing site. In most communities around the world, there are opportunities to have free, anonymous, or confidential HIV tests. When I learned that I was HIV positive, I was then in a position where I could follow the advice of my doctor and, when indicated, start taking the modern medication available today in most parts of the world. The good news is that with modern medicine, an HIV positive person who finds out early because of voluntary testing has every chance of living a long and normal lifespan. So this is known now as the key to the end of AIDS, to test everyone who might be HIV positive, and if they're determined to be HIV positive, to begin to treat them. The reason this is relevant is because someone who is HIV positive and being successfully treated by modern antiretroviral medications is scientifically 96% less likely to transmit the virus to someone else during an unprotected sexual experience. That doesn't mean that you should have unprotected sex. The best and most effective way to protect yourself is to always use condoms and practice safer sex. But the key point here is that if there is a chance that you may have become HIV positive, seek out an anonymous or confidential HIV test in your community, because knowledge is power, and it's time for you to get tested and live longer and be strong. This is the message of my HIV testing Safer Sex Awareness Anthem, called The Power to Be Strong. I produced the song with my good friend Bruno Brugnano, and O Natapon directed the music video, which is available for viewing and sharing, subtitled in 20 languages at youtube.com/thepowertobestrong. If you want to download a free MP3 of the song, I invite you to go to SnowbizNow.com, hover your cursor over The Power to Be Strong in the main submenu, and choose the free download link. Really, this is the key to the end of AIDS. Get tested and live longer and be strong.
Open your heart, feel your light grow within. Move through your fear, take a step and begin. Out of the dark, let your light shine the way. Knowledge is power, turn the night into day. You're not alone, dance with me. Listen to me, open up, take a chance. Transform your life with this magical dance. Deep in your heart is the power to precious and loved. You have so much to give. You're not alone. Dance with me. Listen to the message of my song. Within you is the power to be strong. No matter who you are, no matter what you feel, this is your moment now, and your life is real. So get tested and live longer and be strong. Get tested and live longer and be strong. Rhythm and beat are a part of the dance, inflaming your soul, but please don't take a chance. When passion and love ignite flames of desire, take care of yourself, don't get burned by the fire. You're not alone, dance with me. Listen to the message of my song. Within you is the power to be strong. No matter who you are, no matter what you feel, this is your moment now, and your life is real. So play safely and live longer and be strong. Play safely and live longer and be strong. No matter who you are, no matter what you feel, this is your moment now, and your life is real. So play safely and live longer and be strong. Hear my song, life goes on. Get tested and live longer and be strong.
I want to thank you for listening to SnowbizNow. I would lose my title of PromoHomo if I didn't once in a while let you know that if you're interested in my services as an actor, as a master of ceremonies, as a voiceover artist, if you want me to appear in your movie or your TV program or help support your event, or if you want me to do a live performance of my HIV testing safer sex awareness song, The Power to Be Strong, let me know. Visit SnowbizNow.com, where you'll find my contact information, and for the specific information about my acting, including clips of past performances, hover over the About item in the main sub-menu. Just hover over the About item in the main sub-menu. As promised, it's time for a medically intense lecture by one of the HIV cure researchers from the City of Hope in Southern California. And following the lecture, I have important information about the Timothy Ray Brown Foundation that is part of the World AIDS Institute. That's coming up after this lecture.
Our next speaker will talk about some of the research that's being done to replicate what happened to Timothy and other people living with HIV and cancer. Dr. John Zaya is from the City of Hope, which is practically next door in Duarte, and where they're doing some cutting-edge research that he's going to tell us about. So thank you, Dr. Zaya.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for inviting me. I'm here instead of John Rossi. Some of you know John Rossi from talks that he's given out here, and he became ill several months ago and was not able to make this, but he sends his warmest wishes to you all. So I'm from a City of Hope, which primarily is known for doing bone marrow transplants. We do more than any other center on the West Coast. We've done about 11,000 of these. Each one of them costs probably $200,000 to $300,000. Some of them more than that because you may end up in the ICU. When we're looking for a donor, you send a tube of blood and have it analyzed, and then there's a computer database that can find your donors if you happen to have one. If you happen to be an African American, you're going to have a problem. If you happen to be Asian, you may have a problem. If you are Scandinavian, Germanic, from Northern Europe, you're going to be more lucky, I think, because for some reason you can find donors easier. Japan, if you are Japanese and you're in Japan, it's incredibly easy to find donors. It's remarkable. But the insurance company here will say, okay, you have a possibility of 200. Take the first 10 and see if it works. See if you actually have a micro match, we call it. So we like to get 10 out of 10 HLA, or what we call tissue types. And then you say, okay, that's the donor. If the donor says yes, you collect the cells, and then you go on from there with the transplant. So here, the insurance company would have said, okay, you found that first one within the first 10, go with it. But the Germans actually allowed Gero Hutter to go on to about the 60th, I think, or 61st or 67th. And that was the one who had this rare genetic problem that tends to occur in parts of Europe where there was the Black Plague back in the Middle Ages. And if you survive that, the chances are you had a defect that is, we now know it as the CCR5 defect, which is a gene for inflammation. And it makes your lymph nodes be healthy and that sort of thing. Well, when you have bubonic plague, you don't want big lymph nodes. Those are the buboes that you die of. They hemorrhage and then you die. So the people who couldn't do that, make big lymph nodes, survived. And their children and the children of their children are now the people who have this defect in CCR5, which means the HIV virus, which needs this gene to get into the cell, cannot get into the cell. Kind of a remarkable thing. So I'm going to talk to you, though, about something that's even more crazy than that, and that is, can you really use stem cells for therapy of HIV? But Timothy didn't tell you, between those sentences, is how deathly sick he must have felt during this chemotherapy. So when you're spending $200,000 or $300,000, what you're doing is you're buying medicine to give these patients that can make them really sick. It destroys their existing immune system, and then you rescue them with this donor, usually a matched, unrelated donor, some stranger who lives in some faraway place, and we actually collect the cells at that place and have them shipped in. And just the shipping alone is done by courier, usually with a personal escort, which in itself is expensive. So stem cells are these cells that we all have in our body. We, of course, originate from the principal stem cell, which is kind of an egg. But as an adult, we have cells that repair our body. They're growth and repair cells. We have them in the bone, we have them in the brain, we have them all over the body. We especially have them in the blood because the blood's turning over cells so frequently. So the question is, could we reproduce this story that Timothy just told us? And the idea then is you have these mother cells right here in this part of it, and they give birth to all kinds of cells that we have, but especially to T cells, which is the key cell of the immune system. And also these other cells, these monocytes that are important for immunity. Even the plasma cells or B cells that make antibody. So those are the cells that we want to protect from HIV. Or we want to send them a signal that would inhibit the HIV. And you'll hear that from later speakers of what kind of genetic modifications you could be making. So can bone marrow-derived cells, now these stem cells we can get easily are from the bone marrow. So we call them the bone marrow-derived cells. Could they cure HIV/AIDS? Well, we know in one case it happened, but it has not been reproduced despite the 4 years or so, almost 4 years that Timothy has had since his treatment. But HIV actually comes into the patient. This actually here shows the virus linking to some proteins on the surface of a cell. And one of these is CCR5, this blue one right here. And then it allows the virus to enter the cell. It's like a doorknob on the cell. But once in, this is the B part of this, it can go to various cells of the system. T cells, what we call dendritic cells, or these mononuclear cells. It can go to the lymph nodes, and then it can be present in the brain, in the spleen, in the gut, and many other organs. And the question is, how then could you eliminate the virus every place from a bone marrow transplant? Well, these cells, the mother cells that you're transferring in, actually become, as you can imagine, as I showed you, T cells, B cells, macrophages, and then these cells called reticular endothelial system cells. These are they're kind of like protective cells that exist in all of the tissues of your body, and they derive from the bone marrow. And you get them in your brain, you get them in your spleen, you get them in your bones. And if you ever had a transplant from your sister, let's say, you're a man and you have a transplant from your sister, or you're a woman and you have a transplant from your brother, eventually these cells will replace all your cells, and you will have the opposite gender. So the man will have female cells in their brain, in their spleen, in their heart, etc. So it's a remarkable thing. It takes several years for this to actually happen. So in theory, if you could protect those cells, or if they were genetically protected, you might replace the whole system. You wouldn't expect it to happen so fast, but Timothy stopped taking this medicine quite early. The question is that the reason that Timothy is better today or not? And that's what I'm going to talk about. So here is Tim Brown. And he got the transplant, and he turned blue. But you could imagine if you took other stem cells from a stranger, and we call this an allogeneic source. When it's not you, it's an allogeneic source because it's different from you. And in this case, it could be the CCR5 delta 32, delta 32. That's the double knockout mutation that his donor had. But what if it wasn't? What would happen if it was a normal CCR5 donor? Could that have some anti-HIV effect? It certainly can have an anti-leukemia effect, because we do, as I said, 11,000 transplants for leukemia, and that leukemia gets knocked out by the allogeneic reaction. That is the foreignness of the donor coming into the body and saying, where am I? I'm going to start killing this foreignness. We have what we call graft versus host disease. And in that process, we control it very carefully with immune drugs, but it can recognize leukemia cells and destroy them. If you take identical twins, one with leukemia and one without, and you transplant them, it does not work. You do the same treatment, chemotherapy, total body irradiation, that tumor will often recur because the tissues are exactly the same. There is no graft versus host reaction. Okay, so here's what actually Timothy went through. You have a collection of your cells right here. So you take a medicine for several days called GCSF, and then you go to the blood bank and you go on a machine that takes the blood out of one arm, circulates it around, puts it in your other arm, but it removes the cells, the stem cells in the process. So it returns your blood minus the stem cells. The stem cells got into your blood from the marrow because of this medication, this GCSF. So you mobilize the stem cells from the bone marrow, do a blood collection, isolate the stem cells, freeze them. You may not have to freeze them. If you time it just right, you don't have to freeze it. And then you prepare the recipient. Now, that is a euphemism for all the bad things they did to Timothy. And we call that the conditioning of the patient to receive the transplant. So we know from experience that people with AIDS can mobilize their stem cells very well. There's been many, many transplants in the setting of AIDS lymphoma where you have to have a transplant. They mobilize extremely well. There's self-to-self, those are called self-to-self transplants, or auto-transplants, not allogeneic, in AIDS patients. And these engraft very quickly. Within 10 days, these patients are back with peripheral blood cells and can go home in a few more days. So there's a take. The marrow actually takes, or the stem cells take, and they begin to grow, and we call that engraftment. And they have very, very similar treatment-related side effects as a transplant patient who does not have HIV. So there is really no great increase in risk compared to a non-HIV positive transplant. The CD4 cells recover, and there is one problem that is concomitant treatments for with antivirals can sometimes interfere with the immunosuppressive medications that are needed during the transplant, but the physicians can work out those differences. And we know how to do controlled phase 2 studies. There's actually been a study that was done by Ron Mitsuyasu and his colleagues, you might have been involved in that study, that actually showed the model by which you could actually transplant people, and if you had enough of them and you had controls, you could take them off their heart and then see what happened to the HIV. So we know how to do a phase 2 trial in this setting. We just don't know all of the elements that we need to know about the best way to approach the conditioning of an AIDS patient so that you're not giving lethal chemotherapy. Timothy got lethal chemotherapy. If for some reason his donor, that was the donor unit that was ready to be transferred into him, for some reason there was an explosion in that room and you lost that donor in that unit, he would have been in sad shape. You would have had to quickly find another donor to rescue him because to kill his leukemia, his physicians gave him basically a lethal dose of therapy, or either radiation or whatever the other medicines were. So Garo Hutter was his doctor, and he and I looked at all of the cases of people who had been transplanted for leukemia prior to Timothy, just to see what the story was. And these were case reports in the literature. And there was, surprisingly, there was actually 56 such cases. Some of them, a lot of them came before there was heart therapy. But a few of them came after that. And I think a lot of them came before heart because there was nothing else to do. So people said, I've got a healthy brother, et cetera, let's try a transplant. You can see the survival is shown right here. They didn't do very well before heart, but about 10%, 10 to 20% survived a long time, which is kind of surprising. With heart, though, they actually survived very well. And a non-HIV positive leukemic who gets transplanted has about an adult has about a 60% chance of long-term survival. And so these patients did quite well, about 50%. So this is without, many of them had got transplanted and they may not have even known they had AIDS at the time of the diagnosis of the leukemia. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So we know that actually you could do it without in a way that would not be that much different from a non-HIV positive. And they actually recover their CD4s, but you can see the CD4s are actually kind of low. If you look at it on the far left, you see 200, around 150 to 200. And as you go out with time, there's a gradual increase, but it doesn't get robust up to 800, 900, 1,000 like we see with our AIDS lymphoma patients after they recover. And I mentioned the problem with the drugs. Well, there were 2 patients reported this summer. They, again, were allogeneic, that is, they were not self-transplants, but they were patients that had HIV infection, that had been on antiretroviral therapy for a long time. One of them had Hodgkin's disease, which is a form of lymphoma, who did well with standard treatment. Then it recurred, and he had to get some more therapy, did not do well, so he then got a self-transplant, an autologous transplant. And he relapsed from that as well. So he really had bad luck, and he had a lot of therapy. And you think you had a lot of therapy. This sounds like this patient really had a lot of what we call dose-intense type of therapy. So he came to the hospital in Boston, to the Brigham and Women's Hospital, and he had a reduced intensity course of treatment. We call it RIC. This is where you don't destroy all of his system because he's already had so much toxicity that he may not be able to tolerate it. When we transplant an older patient, like over 70, we do the same thing. We do reduced intensity. And then you basically let the graft is going to grow in the patient, and the graft versus host disease is going to be required to kill the tumor because you didn't kill it with your own radiation or the chemotherapy. These patients remained on their antiretroviral therapy. And they had to carefully control the graft versus host disease. And they use all of these drugs. The one you're familiar with probably is prednisone, because when the worsening of the graft versus host disease occurs, and with graft versus host disease, you get rash, you can get hepatitis, you can get diarrhea because the gut is involved. Those are the three major areas. And patients are very, very sick with graft versus host disease. Did you have graft versus? Do you have much graft versus host disease?
I haven't.
You did. So you know how bad it is.
Yeah, and I took immunosuppressants for quite a while.
Okay.
But I don't think
yeah, but usually you get off of them after a while, and then the graft gets used to you, and you get used to the graft, and then everything is fine. So these patients were on that course. The second patient, very similar, and I won't go into that in detail. But the interesting thing is that, now this is, to look at this, there's time across the middle here in days. And then there's three kinds of classical treatments, tests that we do to measure HIV, and you're familiar with these. The virus load, which is the standard test that we get, or the single copy assay, which is much more sensitive, and it's sensitive down around 1.8 viruses. So this patient did not have any detectable virus in those areas. Then you looked at DNA in the cells, the viral DNA, evidence of the virus in the cells, and this was also a very low level. And then when the virus goes into a cell, it can integrate or not. If it doesn't integrate, it can sit there as a loop structure, and we call it the 2-LTR. The ends of it are called the long terminal repeats, and so it can make a loop. We call it 2-LTR. And none of the virus was detectable in either integrated form or non-integrated form. And this shows you the T cells gradually went up, and this patient hit 1,000 after about 1,300 days, so that's almost 4 years. The second patient, very similar, did not have as many T cells, but still they're up around 500, much better than those patients that Garo Hutter and I had reviewed. So these two patients then underwent a classical, what we call viral outgrowth assay, to see if you could find the virus if you collected a large amount of cells. So again, you put them into one of these machines and you collect billions of cells, basically, and you culture them. You say, if there's virus there, we're going to find it. And this is an assay for the latent state of the virus. That is, the amount of virus that's in a latent state will come out in this assay, and you can then say, it was 1 in 1,000,000 cells, it was 1 in 10,000 cells, it was 1 in 25 million cells. You can grade the amount of virus that's in that population of cells. And this was 0 in 25 million or whatever it was. No ability to find virus in this patient, and in either of those two patients. So the question is, the other thing they noticed was declining HIV antibodies. So if the immune system doesn't see the virus, it doesn't make antibody. And so you gradually lose your antibody, and that's what was happening in these patients, suggesting there was minimal virus left in these patients. So the question is, why did this happen? These patients got a normal CCR5 donor. It was what we call wild-type CCR5. It was not the mutant. And so the hematologists who take care of leukemics will say, well, there's an obvious reason. You had a graft versus leukemia effect that hit the cells in which the HIV was housed, and it was a graft versus HIV effect. So that, in fact, you don't need to have a donor like yours. You could take any donor, and if you have an allogeneic effector, this graft versus host disease, it will seek and destroy the HIV-infected cells. That's the premise. We don't know it for sure. But if these two patients come off therapy and they are like Timothy and they don't have any virus detectable, then it would be likely that this is the explanation. So why don't we just find a bunch of CCR5 negative donors and just do this, except for the cost and except for the toxicity. The other reason is it is almost statistically impossible for there to be a second Timothy Brown. You had a 1% chance of finding a donor that was CCR5 negative, but only about 1 in 10 million or 1 in 25 million to find the perfect donor. Now, because of your Germanic background, that's why I asked that. You probably actually were closer to 1 in perhaps a million, and not so far. But in general, it's a pretty rare person who is exactly like you in terms of the tissue type. So 1% of 10 to 25 million is 1 in 2.5 billion chances. So I don't think the second case is going to come up pretty soon. But there is a source of CCR5 negative cells, and that is there are babies that are born, and when they're born, we collect the placenta is full of blood, and it's full of stem cells. So the obstetrician hangs the placenta up, and the umbilical cord comes down, puts a little bottle there, and collects the placental blood. We call it cord blood, and that's full of stem cells. And in fact, if you were to screen those, as we did, so we started a project in which we screened about 15 or 16,000 units. We did it with the STEM site, which is a company over in Glendora. And in fact, we did find a lot of units. We have 120 units that are CCR5 negative, just like your donor was. And we're trying to decide then, is it ethical to proceed with any kind of a transplant using those cells? Certainly, I think if there were a patient with leukemia, yes. Another patient, that's the issue. I won't go through this. It's a simple PCR assay. It's like a forensic DNA test, and you can find that red deletion that I show in the middle quite easily. I won't go through that. But one person needed a transplant. She was a woman in Illinois. We just happened to match one of our 120. So we were bound to give it up, so to speak, because it was part of the National Marrow Donor Program. And so she got transplanted. She did well. She went into remission. And she then had cells in her blood that were CCR5 negative. So we got the cells, and in fact, they did not replicate HIV. This shows the blue thing right here. Normal control group virus, just as we would have expected. We actually have a protocol. It's in waiting right now. It's like a lady in waiting or something. I don't know. We have written a protocol for the day when we know how to use these cells most safely in an HIV positive patient. And we have a regimen that would be not unlike your regimen, but actually much easier to go through. It's a reduced intensity. It uses some of the same drugs, cyclophosphamide, fludarabine, rabbit antithymocyclavin is something you got, and fractionated total body irradiation, but just 200, we call it centigrade, which is just a little touch of radiation. And we use this in older people. We use it in kids that have aplastic anemia that don't have a leukemia, so you don't have to knock out the last leukemic cell. You just need to make space for the new cells to grow in. And they handle that quite well, usually without even having to be in the hospital very long. So that may be something that could happen in the future. But it is the use of one's own stem cells and genetically modify them that would probably be the best thing in the future. And you're going to hear about that in the next two speakers. But I just want to end by saying, going through some of the trials that have happened or are about to happen. So we have this myeloablative conditioning regimen in AIDS lymphoma. This is the study in which we genetically modify the person's own cells. They're going to have a transplant anyways for the lymphoma. So we take some of those cells and genetically treat them and then give them back after the transplant. There's a new trial that will be opening shortly, which we call the Calamune trial that Dr. Zach's been involved in. And that uses also a genetic modification, but not into patients who are going to have treatment for leukemia or lymphoma, but healthy HIV positives. And they will get a conditioning regimen for the first time. But that conditioning regimen will be a very, very light touch of an anti-cancer medicine that will not make them very sick. And that's the question of the study. Can they get away with a very light touch, or will the cells just disappear and not even find a place to grow? We basically have to make space, as I said, in the marrow for these new cells to grow, and that's the purpose of that chemotherapy. But we know that in AIDS lymphoma patients, they do very well, and this is our group of patients. The blue is HIV positive leukemics, and the lymphoma patients, and the green is non-HIV positive lymphoma patients undergoing the same therapy, do exactly the same. So the question is, can you genetically modify? So here you're going to try to zap this multipotent progenitor. It's a great name for it. It's like the mother cell of the blood. It can make all these other cells, and you basically want to put genes into it that will block HIV, and you're about to hear about those. Again, it's the same system. You mobilize it, you collect, you genetically modify, and then you may have to use backup cells that are not treated if you're going to have a patient with lymphoma, because you don't want to destroy the curative element of the cells. So what we do is we genetically modify them, infuse them, and then wait if we have to use the other untreated cells. They're always there if, for example, something bad happens, like they don't engraft. But for lymphoma, you have to use this other treatment, this multiple rounds of chemotherapy in that week before the transplant, like Timothy had, and that destroys the lymphoma. Oops, sorry. And the CalImmune study is going to be much different. It's just going to give a treatment with this drug called busulfan. And it's going to give it a low dose and then a higher dose in different patients, and one group will not even have any treatment. And also, when you purify the cells here, you throw away, you take the stem cells and you throw away everything else which contains T cells. So if you genetically modified those T cells, you could also come in with T cells. So you could theoretically treat a patient with his own T cells and his own stem cells that were genetically protected from HIV. And that's part of the trial that will be done in San Francisco by CalImmune. I think I'll probably stop there. I have just the slides about the details of these things, but I think it might come out in the question and answer period. It'd be best to stop. So thank you very much.
HIV cure research is still in its infancy, perhaps just a couple of years old as a direct result of the Timothy Ray Brown case in 2009, showing the scientific community a proof of concept that a cure is possible. Cure research was something that was discussed in the early days of the AIDS epidemic, before there were antiretrovirals available for people living with HIV and AIDS. Leading scientists from around the world continue to reiterate their belief that Timothy Ray Brown is the reason they believe a cure is now possible. This realization is both humbling and exciting for Timothy, but he is clear when he says, "I cannot do this alone. I need your help." I invite you to join the Timothy Ray Brown Foundation to help win the war against AIDS through finding an HIV cure for all. They believe your knowledge, experience, and support will help them fulfill their dream and the dream of millions. If you believe in this worthy cause, I ask you to also support this endeavor by informing your peers and colleagues, urging them to join the Timothy Ray Brown Foundation on this incredible journey. The World AIDS Institute, which you can find at worldaidsinstitute.org, has a vision for the future with the Timothy Ray Brown Foundation, including creating a unified cure coalition made up of organizations, corporations, institutions, governments, and individuals, all dedicated to the goal of helping find a cure for HIV. The Timothy Ray Brown Foundation is committed to becoming a force of unification from Hollywood to Washington, D.C., and from Bangkok to Johannesburg, South Africa. The Foundation will foster more public-private partnerships as well as encourage governments around the world to support HIV cure research. In the process, they are determined to inspire cure-related advocacy, effective education, efficient funding, sound policy, and heightened recruitment for cure-related clinical trials. Programs they are focusing on in 2013 include creation of the world's first CCR5 Delta 32 negative global registry to help researchers identify new pathways to eradicate HIV from the body. In addition, in 2013, they plan to host Timothy Ray Brown Foundation Cure Summits around the U.S. and around the world to coincide with the 6th anniversary of Timothy being cured. They also plan to create a social media platform called The Cure. Timothy acknowledges that he is neither a scientist nor a doctor. He is, however, living proof that a cure is finally within our reach, but he feels that we must act now. It is the belief of the Timothy Ray Brown Foundation that they have a moral obligation to translate Timothy from being cured into a mainstream remedy that millions of AIDS victims can benefit from, thus helping validate the pain and suffering and deaths of the 30 million people who have died from AIDS and the countless millions who currently are afflicted with this terrible disease. Please help Timothy become one of the millions cured of HIV instead of the first and only. The Timothy Ray Brown Foundation operates under the World AIDS Institute, which was launched June 7, 2011, with a mission of documenting and preserving the global history of AIDS, to inspire action today to improve the lives of people living with HIV/AIDS and their family, friends, and communities, and now also to strengthen the spectrum of innovative initiatives to find a cure. For more information, visit worldaidsinstitute.org. worldaidsinstitute.org. Thank you for tuning into this very special episode of SnowbizNow. Until next time, I am Nicholas Snow.
Open your heart, feel your light grow within. Move through your fear, take a step and begin. Out of the dark, let your light shine the way. Knowledge is power, turn the night into day. You're not alone, dance with me. Listen to me, open up, take a chance. Transform your life with this magical dance. Deep in your heart is the power to live. Precious and loved, you have so much to give. You're not alone, dance with me.
Throughout the program, you've heard me appeal for people to come on board and support this show as a presenting sponsor, a sponsor, an executive producer, associate producer, and the final opportunity would include the announcement of your name right here toward the end of the show. And that is to come on board as a production assistant. All you have to do is make a one-time or a monthly contribution in a very nominal amount. For information on how to participate at any of these levels, simply go to SnowbizNow.com and click on the Team SnowbizNow link in the main sub menu.
Snowbiz Now is brought to you by Nicholas Snow Productions. For everything you may wish to know about our company, to contact us about buying advertising or procuring our syndicated content, or to submit questions, comments, breaking news, or gossip, simply visit SnowbizNow.com. Once again, that's SnowbizNow.com. Until next time, thank you for being a part of the snowstorm. We're honored by your presence. You're listening to Snowbiz Now with Nicholas Snow. Small screen, big queen, worldwide audience. It's not radio, it's Gadio.